Before tower troops, there was only the Princess Tower. She was the foundation of Clash Royale defense, the card every player could rely on. Then came the Canoneer, shaking things up a little but never truly breaking the order of things. And then the Dagger Duchess arrived. From the moment she entered the arena, it was different. She didn't just join the game, she owned it. Matches stopped being about strategy and started being about her. Whole decks bent around her presence. Players who had her dominated, players who didn't were left in the dust. For the first time ever, the Princess Tower wasn't the queen of defense. The Duchess had claimed her throne. This is the story of how the Dagger Duchess rose from nothing to rule Clash Royale, and why her reign is still remembered as one of the most oppressive in history. Before the Dagger Duchess reigned supreme over towers, there was chaos. Clash Royale was still figuring out what it even wanted to be. Back then, there weren't fancy royals watching over your towers, no duchess, no princess, not even a king, just glowing blue crystals, fragile defenses, and a world that barely resembled the game we know today. Supercell's Art of Supercell book gives us a peek into that strange era. Back when Clash Royale was still called Wizard Arena Clash of Clans, the battlefield looked like something out of a fever dream, and we didn't see a lot of troops we recognize anymore. But things evolved fast. The game's DNA started taking shape, the crystals became towers, the wizards gave way to royalty. Yeah, that's right, the wizard was the original king. And instead of princess towers, we had archer towers for a time, until one day the princess took her place. That was the moment Clash Royale found its visual identity, and she was the only tower troop for nearly a full decade. But then came January of 2024, and everything changed. His arrival was a huge deal. For the first time, players could swap out the princess for an entirely different unit, giving their towers a completely new identity. The Canoneer brought a slower, heavier playstyle, trading the princess's consistent chip damage for massive, single-shot hits. He was incredible against tanks like Giant or Golem, but struggled against swarms, forcing players to build decks that could cover those weaknesses. He launched strong, maybe too strong, earning 2 quick nerfs not long after release. But even then, he proved that tower troops could work in totally different ways, and that the princess didn't have to be the only option. And while the Canoneer opened the door, the Dagger Duchess was the one who walked through it and took it over. I might even say kicked it down. The Dagger Duchess isn't just another tower troop, because unlike the Canoneer, who had its pros and cons, the Dagger Duchess seemed to directly rival the Princess Tower. She's not there to guard the throne, she's there to own it. When the Dagger Duchess arrived in April of 2024, she instantly became the card everyone was talking about. There was almost no reason to prefer the Tower Princess when the Dagger Duchess existed. And she even overshadowed the Canoneer in most situations. More health, faster damage, and no real weakness. She was everything a tower troop could possibly be. Her mechanic was deceptively simple. The Duchess threw daggers in rapid succession, each strike chipping away at her target while a bar above her slowly depleted. Once that bar emptied, her attack speed dropped dramatically. But here's the thing, she almost never reached that state. Her burst damage was so high, she could eliminate most threats before running out of daggers, then recharge safely between pushes. The idea was that she'd struggle against big tanks like golems or giants, and on paper, once her daggers were gone, she would be too slow to handle their heavy pushes. But in practice, that weakness barely existed. Beatdown decks weren't even that strong at the time, and the Duchess often provided so much value before running out that the rest of your troops could easily clean up whatever was left. But at least Beatdown came back into the meta a little bit due to that being her only real weakness. Now, if you enjoy drifting through game worlds and their hidden stories, I just started a new channel called Cyric. It's gonna be filled with calm lore and history videos about Hollow Knight, Elden Ring, Skyrim, Sonic, you name it. There's a link down in the description. I would love to see you there. Now, let's talk about some of those broken interactions. She could solo defend an evolved Firecracker, Wall Breakers, Electro Dragon, Hunter, or even a Goblin Hut. With an Electro Spirit's help, she could completely delete a Goblin Barrel, and she could nearly take out a mini P.E.K.K.A. all by herself. There just wasn't much she couldn't do. Cycle decks suffered the most, since she shredded through their cheap cards faster than they could cycle back to them. But because everyone on top ladder was running her, it kinda balanced out. If you didn't have a Duchess, you basically weren't competing. And speaking of accessibility, she was a nightmare to obtain. Remember how the Canoneer was already hard to unlock despite being epic? The Dagger Duchess was legendary, which made things even worse. Players without her were left behind, while those who did have her felt unstoppable. Her dominance didn't just stop at ladder play. By this point in Clash Royale history, the presence of the Dagger Duchess had become impossible to ignore, and it was clear that she had reshaped the entire meta. She was appearing in practically every top-tier deck, and her influence was everywhere. If you looked at the 14 most popular decks at that time, she was included in all of them. And it wasn't until the 15th spot that the Princess Tower finally appeared. This meant that the Dagger Duchess was being used in almost every type of deck imaginable. She could be found in giant decks, in various golem decks, in goblin giant decks, lava hound decks, expo decks, graveyard decks, drill decks, and even royal hog decks. Essentially, any deck archetype that could accommodate her was running her, which showed just how versatile and powerful she had become. This dominance was not just limited to casual ladder matches. The same pattern held in Grand Challenges, one of the most competitive and skill-demanding formats in the game. In 12-win Grand Challenge runs, nearly every winner was running the Dagger Duchess in their deck. Interestingly, nearly all of their opponents were also using her. When given the option, players overwhelmingly chose the Duchess over any other tower troop. Tower troops had never been so central to competitive success, and the Dagger Duchess was the reason why. It wasn't just that she was extremely strong, she had become effectively mandatory in every deck once she was available. Choosing to play without her was almost unheard of, and attempting to compete against someone who had her could feel nearly impossible. Even when looking at the top 1,000 ranked matches, the story was consistent. Usage rates for the Dagger Duchess in these matches hovered around 95%. The only exceptions were occasional decks that included Canoneer or other alternatives, but those were extremely rare. In competitive play, her dominance reached its peak during the CRL April monthly finals, which is one of the most important competitive events in the game. There she achieved a 100% usage rate. Every single professional player in the finals used the Dagger Duchess in every single match they played. This level of dominance was unprecedented. It wasn't just high usage, it was complete control over the meta, and it highlighted how critical she had become to competitive play. The community quickly recognized just how unbalanced she had become, and many players started to discuss potential ways to adjust her power level. Suggestions ranged from reducing her hit points to match or even fall below the Princess Tower, to slowing down her recharge rate so that she couldn't attack so continuously. Other ideas involved tweaking her damage output to reduce her raw damage per second, or adjusting the mechanics of her daggers so that it would deal less overall damage. Some players even called for a full rework of the card to make her less universally dominant. Across the community, there was a clear consensus that something had to be done because the Dagger Duchess had effectively become the ultimate tower troop. So yeah, she was the ultimate tower troop, but by how much? 70%? 80%? Well, towards the end of April 2024, Boss uploaded a tier list video, and by this point the Dagger Duchess had firmly cemented her place at the very top of every tier list. Even players who had previously been critical of tower troops acknowledged just how dominant she had become. Before her release, cards like the Canoneer were often considered slightly stronger than the Princess Tower at the top of ladder, due to their additional damage per second and their incredible defensive reliability. The Canoneer was notoriously difficult to break through, making it a solid choice for many decks and a dependable defensive option for top-tier players. However, once the Dagger Duchess entered the scene, she immediately outclassed both the Canoneer and the Princess Tower. She had more health than the Princess Tower, and her daggers could shred enemy troops almost almost instantly. And while she did require a brief recharge after unleashing her daggers, other cards or defensive buildings in a deck could cover that downtime, meaning her initial impact was enormous and almost always decisive. Her dominance was reflected in her usage rates, but how high was her usage rate really? Well, in the top 1,000 ladder matches, roughly 95% of players were running her. 95. She had become the go-to tower troop for nearly every deck, and it was clear to the entire community that she was incredibly powerful, arguably overpowered, and in serious need of a nerf. And the introduction of the Void spell made attacking nearly impossible. The Void was impeccable at taking out support troops for a positive elixir trade. For just 3 elixir, it could completely eliminate a 6 elixir Sparky, which was ridiculous. Its single target damage was too strong and struck too quickly for opposing units to block effectively, meaning any attempt to push could be punished before it ever gained momentum. While it struggled against swarms like skeletons or minions, the value it provided against key support units was insane. When combined with the Duchess, enemy pushes had almost no chance of succeeding whatsoever. The Duchess shredded incoming units with her fast, high damage daggers, while the Void removed any support behind them. Tanks attempting to lead a push were also left vulnerable, and with the Duchess holding the line, opponents could rarely reach the tower. Luckily, on the 15th of May, the Dagger Duchess finally received a nerf. Her hit points were reduced by 15.8%, a significant change that aimed to bring her more in line with the other tower troops. Honestly, it had never made much sense at all that she had more health than the Princess Tower while lacking any real weaknesses and having a higher DPS. This adjustment was a step toward rebalancing her, but given just how dominant she had been up to this point, many players still felt that her presence in decks was extremely powerful and impactful. After all, it was never really her health that made her so problematic. The real issue was with her damage and her hit speed. The extra health was just a bonus annoyance, allowing her to survive a little longer while continuing to shred opposing troops. Even with that hit point nerf, her raw damage per second and rapid attack rate remained the key factors that made her so dominant in nearly every deck and at nearly every level of play. So while this nerf was a step in the right direction, it didn't quite do what it needed to do, which was making the Dagger Duchess less oppressive. But the change that actually started to bring her power under control came a little over a month later. On the 17th of June with the Goblin World update, the Dagger Duchess received a major adjustment. Her damage was decreased by 27%, which significantly reduced her ability to instantly shred enemy troops. At the time, her dagger cooldown was lowered from 1.2 seconds to 0.8. This change made her defensive pressure feel more balanced. She was still strong at defending against pushes, but no longer overwhelmingly oppressive. Unlike the 15.8% HP nerf in May, which only affected her survivability, this update directly addressed what made her so dominant: her raw damage per second and rapid attack speed, allowing the meta to recover while keeping her viable as a defensive tower troop. To really understand just how much weaker she became, let's take a look at a few key interactions. The difference was night and day. Take the Firecracker for example. Before the nerf, the Dagger Duchess could completely shut her down. Afterward, the Firecracker would not only survive, but even land a shot at the tower. The same thing happened with the Phoenix. What used to be a clean counter suddenly became a losing trade. The Phoenix would hit your tower and still respawn, but the most shocking example was the Minion Horde. Before, the Duchess could handle it surprisingly well for a tower troop. After the nerf though, forget it. The Horde didn't just deal damage, they deleted your tower. Even against something simple like skeleton dragons, the difference was massive. But one of the craziest ones has to be the Witch. Just look at the before and after for this one.
To be good against swarms, but once again she really struggles against a Witch. Even though the Witch only spawns a few skeletons, the Witch can still take the entire tower against the Dagger Duchess.
This wasn't just a light adjustment or a few number tweaks. The Dagger Duchess after the nerf was a shadow of her former self. This nerf finally changed the meta a little. Before this, you would mainly see Duchess paired with Beatdown decks. The Giant, for example, had finally returned as a primary win condition, no longer limited to pairing with the graveyard. Decks featuring Giant with Pump and a variety of support cards began dominating the ladder, including multiple entries in the top 100 worldwide. The strategy relied on stacking pumps to build a large elixir advantage, which allowed players to gradually overwhelm their opponents. Defensive synergy became key, with cards like Night Witch and Phoenix making it difficult for opponents to respond effectively. The Duchess played a central role in these decks, handling counter pushes and allowing other troops to safely apply pressure. Interestingly, traditional counter cards and spells such as Earthquake saw very little use in this meta. The combination of defensive units and support troops made it too difficult for Earthquake to reliably clear waves, while Night Witch and other high-value units created additional problems for spell-based counters. Players instead relied on poison or other damaging spells to chip away at units and maintain control.
But yeah, you can see when you're against decks that have the poison, you can kind of bait out the poison. So if you're going in for a Night Witch, they might poison it, and then that means you can pump, and then vice versa. So it's like if they poison the pump, well then you use the Night Witch. And the Giant got a shot? Oh my goodness.
Overall, the meta became heavily beatdown focused, emphasizing strong defensive placements, careful elixir management, and sustained pushes. Deck building revolved around pairing high-health tanks with multiple support units and defensive troops, creating a game environment where controlling the board and building incremental advantages was far more important than quick one-off attacks. We finally saw a more balanced meta with some variety. Cycle decks came back, and so did the Princess Tower. But to ensure the Dagger Duchess didn't just become slightly less dominant and to actually bring her power down to a more balanced level, Supercell hit her with a nerf yet again in the next major update. On the 2nd of July, the Balance team increased the Dagger Duchess's attack time interval from 0.35 seconds to 0.45, and raised her dagger cooldown from 0.8 seconds to 0.9. These changes significantly reduced her defensive output, slowing her attacks and making her much less oppressive. With these adjustments, her dominance in decks at the top of ladder finally started to fade. And I'm gonna be honest here, they pretty much killed her. But maybe that was for the best. Even after she was effectively killed in July of 2024, the Dagger Duchess continued to receive smaller adjustments as Supercell fine-tuned her balance. Then, in December of 2024, Clash Royale introduced a brand new tower troop, the Royal Chef.
At least we're healing. Level 17 P.E.K.K.A is shredding that. Oh my, and it's gonna heal up. Please, Rogo's level 18 P.E.K.K.A. Okay, this is what I wanted. Level 18 P.E.K.K.A, it's healing a shit ton. The amount of damage that hit just did is fucking crazy.
Now, unlike the Duchess, whose power relied on raw defensive damage, the Chef was a support-focused tower troop, boosting the level of the strongest troops on the field. This mechanic revitalized beatdown decks, giving Giant, Golem, and evolved P.E.K.K.A archetypes new staying power and scaling that the Duchess simply couldn't match. Her single-target daggers, already weakened by a bunch of previous nerfs, struggled against these empowered pushes, and by this point, the meta had shifted to favor massive tank pushes supported by the Chef, and the Duchess's presence felt increasingly irrelevant. Following the Chef's release, the Duchess continued to receive minor balance updates in 2025, attempting to keep her viable without letting her dominate again. On the 8th of January 2025, a balance update increased her projectile speed from 600 to 1000, slightly improving how fast her daggers traveled across the battlefield. However, on April 9th, her damage was reduced by 4%, further toning down her defensive output. Then on the 4th of August, her attack time interval was increased to 0.5 seconds from 0.45, subtly slowing her rate of fire. And while these adjustments kept her alive as a defensive option, she was now fully overshadowed, with the Royal Chef dominating the support-heavy beatdown strategies that defined the meta. Now go check out our Hollow Knight video. It took over 10 days to make, and we put a lot of effort into it. I'll see you there.